under the rules of Congress, many of the most important pieces of legislation require 60% approval, not 51%. And so the Democrats will still have the ability to gum things up, whether through filibusters or by voting down proposals. So this is not going to be just all hunky dory for the Republicans.
Let's return to the US, where the first steps are taking place in the transition from a Biden administration to a Trump one. Today, the president-elect has said that there is, quote, no price tag for his campaign promise of mass deportations, and is in the process of making the cabinet appointments that will decide the future of the US. Let's talk to Marc Fisher, associate editor and columnist at the Washington Post. Marc, it's a busy time, an exciting time. What are you seeing? What are you hearing?
Well, it is a busy time, and there's a great deal of consternation on the left and rejoicing on the right. But there's also a feeling of exhaustion. And I think a lot of people, it was only a few months ago that three-quarters of Americans were telling pollsters that they did not want Donald Trump to be a candidate again this year. So there is an overall exhaustion with Trump. And now that the reality is sinking in of a second term, I think even a lot of Republicans are saying, boy, did we wish we had better choices in this election. But it is what it is. And so the preparations are beginning, and the recriminations are going on the Democratic side. And on the Republican side, it's the good old grab for jobs.
Oh, right. And I hear there's quite a bit of consternation, rows, and people coveting prize positions. What can you tell us about who's got what thus far?
Well, the only appointment that Trump has made so far is the selection of the first woman ever to serve as White House Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles, who is a longtime Republican campaign operative who was co-campaign manager of the Trump effort this year. She's a very kind of shy person when it comes to appearing in TV or in the press. She likes to stay behind the scenes, which is perfectly fine for a chief of staff. But surely she is keenly aware that Trump goes through chiefs of staff like people with a cold go through a box of tissues. So there's not a whole lot of expectation of longevity in the job. That said, the fact that she is not going to be competing with him for public notice may buy her some time.
Right. Okay. And what about this pledge to, well, we're talking about mass deportation of up to 11 million people, whatever the cost, and it could be hundreds of billions of pounds to the US economy. How realistic are these plans? How much fear is there going to be among those migrants, many of whom have settled in the US for years?
Well, it's highly unrealistic. It would be extraordinarily expensive, but far more than that, it would be logistically a nightmare. There have been previous efforts, certainly President Obama, who was the American champion of deportations more than any other administration. They sent, some thousands of illegal immigrants back home, and that was an enormous operation. There is just not the existing infrastructure, certainly not the existing manpower, the Border Patrol, or the other authorities that would have to take part in this operation. So I think what they'll end up doing is a few token small-scale operations aimed at people who've been convicted or arrested for various crimes. But I think the larger impact is exactly what you implied, which is the fear and loathing that's out there in the community of people who think, oh, they're coming after us. How do we protect our family? And so that is really going to be the driving factor. It was Mitt Romney, the Republican presidential candidate from 8 years ago, who came up with the idea of encouraging self-deportation. In other words, so frightening immigrants that they simply decided to go back home, wouldn't be worth it to stay here. And I think that's what Trump's immigration policy advisors are really hoping for, that they can scare people enough that they'll leave on their own. Of course, the people who would do that are the productive people who are working and paying taxes. The people Trump really wants to go after, those who've committed crimes, are not going to self-deport.
And what about the composition of the other parts of government? We're talking about Congress, because we know that the Republicans have taken control of the Senate. But what about the House? It's taking a while to work out who is going to control that other chamber.
It looks pretty clear at this point that the Republicans will have what they call the trifecta, control of the presidency as well as both houses of Congress. There are a bunch of races that have not been resolved. California seems to have an extraordinary, almost unique inability to count votes in a timely manner. So we won't get resolution on some of those races for some days, but they're trending in the direction that will allow the Republicans to maintain their majority in the House, which would give them control over the various tools of government, the levers of government, both the proposing of bills as well as the Senate's role in approving the president's nominations. So it should be fairly smooth sailing for Trump. That said, under the rules of Congress, many of the most important pieces of legislation require 60% approval, not 51%. And so the Democrats will still have the ability to gum things up, whether through filibusters or by voting down proposals. So this is not going to be just all hunky dory for the Republicans.
So those people who expect Project 2025, that document produced by the Heritage Foundation, that right-leaning think tank, to go through without much difficulty, well, let's not hold our breath.
Right. In the first place, that is an enormous document filled with just a Christmas catalog, a wish list of everything that the conservatives would love to change about the country. You couldn't probably do 5% of what's in there in any given 4 years. So most of it is just a dream. But the other obstacle to Republican implementation of Project 2025 is that there will be public opposition, not only from Democrats, but from independents and even some Republicans. And the Democrats have enough of a hold on Congress that they'll be able to stop most of the most controversial items.
Okay, Mark, thank you very much for your analysis. That's Marc Fisher, Associate Editor and columnist at The Washington Post.